Hi everybody, and Tricia, it's so nice to see you, our friends in New Zealand, and it's been amazing that we've had people from all over the world attend these, and so hello. Hello from everyone that has joined, and firstly, happy, can you say happy International Families Day? We're so excited to be having this conversation. I mean, every day is Families Day, but I think today we wanted to ground our conversation and have a bit more of a critical conversation. We've been hosting these webinars on practice, but really for all of us on the call, what we're acutely aware of is that we need systems and structures and policies and initiatives that allow practice to be family-centred and to be family-focused and to have lived experience at their core. And so everyone in this virtual room together here today, thank you for giving up your time to have these conversations, because without them, we are not going to keep progressing in the way we want to. So before I introduce the amazing guests, I wanted to acknowledge the country, the land of which I'm zooming in from today. So I'm on Wathaurong country, part of the Kulin Nation in Victoria on the Surf Coast, and I'm so grateful for the sea breeze and the beautiful red cliffs in a time always but in isolation, that really is my ally and friends, all the things in nature. So acknowledge the traditional lands across the country and also across the world, and Indigenous knowledge, stewardship. Now to acknowledge the people in the room, and I'm just so humbled that we can have this conversation. And I just wanted to, instead of doing a bio, I just want to sort of introduce how I know and sort of the web and the thread between us. Before I start, I just wanted to say and send love to Tara, my dear friend who is going to join us today to provide Cambodian context. She's woken up really unwell, which is the times that we're in. So she'll join us on another webinar, but just sending love and healing her way. So I'll start with you, Bec. Actually, I should start with, I'll start with Bec, but I'll probably link to Yvonne as well. So Bec came into my world through a friend of mine when Yvonne and I were leading the national blueprint that we've been working on, which is the 10-year strategy for early intervention. And what we really wanted to do in the process of the blueprint is to have it largely informed by families who had been accessing early intervention or had the experience of early intervention, to ensure that we really grounded all of the findings in there. And so I was introduced to Bec, and I remember the conversation I had with Bec. Bec's based in Perth, but I was actually at Uluru when the sun was setting, and I was on the phone to Bec and watching the sunset at Uluru, having this unbelievable conversation, and everything Bec says is like poetry. And I'm just so grateful that we met. Her words and her experience is extraordinary and has really shaped where our 10-year strategy is going to go. Her words are really at the heart of it. So Bec will share her personal story today, but she's also here with a hat on as a relationships manager and team leader at ARC Support Coordination. And I guess your experience of how you got that job in terms of your relationship with the social worker who came into your life is something that will come out today as well. Yeah. And as I mentioned, Yvonne has stepped in. I've been trying to convince Yvonne to be at the front of a webinar for many months now, but she's the magic behind the scenes, the CEO of ECIA. And I'm so happy that she's joined us today because her story is quite extraordinary about her own experience with her son, and then how she went on to create an early intervention service with other families to respond to a need that wasn't there, and sort of change the trajectory of her life from TV producer to CEO of ECIA. And then for those of you who joined before, you would have heard Yvonne and I talking about how we fangirl on Penny Dakin, the CEO of ARACY. And ARACY really is leading the research component of early childhood and families across the country, and their work is phenomenal. Penny's work since she's been in at Penny Dakin, sorry, oh gosh, at ARACY has been extraordinary, and we look to a lot of their frameworks and research to guide the work we do in working with children with disability. We're all in this together. So thank you. I also wanted to acknowledge that there's a building site outside my window, and my partner has decided to learn djembe drumming today, of all days, above my head. So if you can hear some drumming, I don't know what's going on up there, but I just wanted to acknowledge that. So here we are. And I guess, as I mentioned earlier, why we want to have conversation today is to really start to be unfolding these conversations publicly about where we want to head in terms of our North Star, and how families, when we're talking about children and family services, how families are really shaping those. And so I'm going to start with you, Bec, if I can. Yeah. Really to I guess the question is, just to get straight into it, is when you went through your personal experience and sort of your family experience of getting support for your son, Mark, was that a child-focused experience on Mark only, or did people talk to you about your whole family?
It's an interesting process, and in the early days especially, I will note we were very lucky. We had an amazing team around us as far as the hospital went, the children's hospital, the team we had working with us. We were very, very blessed and very lucky, but it is innately a child-centered approach. It's how do we help the child? What do we need for the child? And there are moments where it is about the family, but I think as we progress through our journey, it was a very complex journey, and we kind of just went with it and didn't have. It's difficult when it's not around how do we support the family and how do we access services to support the family. And I think in the early days we had very little input and support from a social work side as well. We didn't really understand in the early days what a social worker's role was or how they could help. It was very much around what do we need to do for Mark? How do we fix Mark? How do we help Mark? And what do we do for Mark? And I think as in those first few years, you kind of run on that, I suppose, anyway, as a parent. It's all, you fall into a little bit of the pattern of child, we want to fix our child and things like that. And you don't realise, I didn't realise early on just how much we needed support and how much without that support, the impact that had on us. And you find a way to cope as a parent because there's no choice. It's, you know, it's your child. What else do? You keep going, you try, you keep going, you fight, you advocate, and you just soldier on in any way you can, as best you can. But the impact is substantial and it's great. And as you move along the journey, you yourself can feel the cracks appear, and you can feel that as much as you try and keep going, as much as you put those walls up and you put that mask on and you try and just keep on keeping on, because you have to for your child, it's hard. And the toll becomes extremely taxing. And you almost tend to lose a little bit of who you are, and you lose your ability to roll with things in a way. And you can start to feel lost and where, you know, how do we keep going? How do we actually keep going now? Because this is just, it's too much. This isn't how we saw this being. And I know for myself, I reached out to my tribe. I was very lucky, and I know that a lot of parents do. They build their tribe around them. They build their mum connections, their parent connections, their families who are in similar situations, and that's where you reach out to, and you help each other and you support each other through that. But unfortunately, at times, the more formal supports and knowing where to go and where to ask for help and actually having those supports in our journey, we didn't have, for instance, any in-home support. We didn't have any supports around caring for Mark. We didn't have any supports around our family unit as far as being able to have that assistance to help us so that we can continue to care for Mark in the home.
I remember, sorry, I was going to say, I remember when we were talking about the NDIS in relation to sort of 10 years and what some of the challenges were, you said this amazing quote, which is that the NDIS should be ensuring us against the fallout of family breakdown, and ensuring us against what can happen, around family breakdown in 10 years. And if we had that shift of sustaining families, and which, we've been pushing for is family-centred plans and family-centred policy, then it doesn't ask a parent to have to put themselves before their child. It asks for the whole family unit, because as you mentioned, a person is going to always put their child first. And so unless the system asks you to think about yourself in that and structure supports around that,
And I think one of the biggest things I learned along our journey is that through supporting the family, that's how we support the child. It's about supporting the family to be able to keep supporting their child. We build the family up, we support them, and innately the child will be okay because they've got the support of their family. They have a strong family unit around them to come around them and keep them going because they're being kept going and supported. For us personally, it took a very long time to even get any in-home supports, from that point of view for us, because that was one of the hardest things in our journey, is the physical toll, the mental toll, the emotional toll of everything we had to do for our boy just to keep him alive. And in 2017 or end of 2016, we'd been back-to-back admissions. It got really tough for us, and that's when I hit the point where I had pushed for too long myself, and we needed supports, and it was starting to crumble around us. And that's when I actually first met the social worker who came to our rescue, and who started ARC with us, Hayden. And he, along with friends of ours who were able to get supports through a foundation for us, we suddenly were able to get supports from other people trying to get supports for us. And the change that made in our lives personally, from having a supported base, from going where we were told, your child's too young, it's your responsibility to look after him. But actually he's too complex, we don't have anyone to help look after him either. And you're sitting there going, hang on a second, how does that work? To suddenly having these people go, how do we support you? How do we build you up? How do we make sure you're okay? What do you need? How do we make sure Mark's little brother's okay? What can we do for him to make sure he's okay? He's got support, he's got continuity, he's got care for him. He's got routine as well. How do we build you guys up and protect you and support you to make Mark okay as well? And that was life-changing for us.
Yeah, I remember, and it's a key recommendation in the blueprint is looking at, even the language that we use, and you really highlighted this a lot in someone that you have never met before telling you it's not reasonable or necessary, or that it's your parental responsibility, and at that time you were not even able to have a shower. No. I can see, Yvonne, I know that for you, Yvonne, you have that fire in your belly that came from your own experience with Asher as well, which led to you on a different path. Do you have something comment?
Yeah, so in fact, language was a barrier from me from day one. So Asher was born in 2009, and we were in that bubble of having our first child, those first days, which are really quite magical, when we had what was known then as the swish test, which is the test for hearing. And he failed, but we knew that he was reacting to sound. So I'd convinced the technician that perhaps her equipment was faulty. So they went away and recalibrated, and then we brought Asher back, and she said, no, he has failed, and you don't fail twice. So He was just 6 weeks old when he had his formal diagnosis that he was hearing impaired. And having never been touched by disability in our lives, it was really kind of shocking. And those initial conversations, which were full of language that I didn't understand, that I couldn't decipher, and that was terrifying, really helped helped enhance that feeling of really sinking and losing all hope. And I felt like I was falling down a bottomless black pit and I couldn't get any help. And I remember at the time her saying, "You're going to have to get early intervention." And I had never heard this term before, and it sounded like it hurt. I didn't know what it was, so I avoided it. I was like, I'm not doing that. That sounds awful. And it wasn't until she started calling me weekly after that, just saying, have you reached out to get Asha any intervention, that I realised the only way I was going to get her to stop calling was to find out what this horrible sounding thing was. And it was back in the very early days of Googling, I guess. So I just Googled my way out of the situation and got quite lucky and found a service that from the moment they answered the first phone call. And I was lucky because I could have been like every parent that I bump into, 10 to 12 of them a day, who are finding every closed door and every wrong door. But I was really lucky that early on in my search, I found a right door, which is a miracle. And I found a right door and spoke to a woman who has transformed my life and is still one of the people I trust the most, who then went on to become Asha's therapist for the next 6 years, who just filled me with joy and hope and used language that I understood and that was uplifting. And I didn't realise how much she had transformed our lives in such a short period of time until the day that I think Asha had only been in the service a couple of months and we received a letter home from the service saying that they were closing their doors. And I remember just like plonking onto the lounge, feeling again this weight of helplessness, you know, come over me, not realizing how I had actually been filled with so much joy and hope in the interim. So within a few days, I had met with a bunch of other mums that I'd never met before, because we discovered there was nowhere else for us to send our child. Now, Ash's disability, as it turns out, is not a complex one, but we were told at birth that his biggest struggle would be spoken language, and even then it might not be intelligible. And so when we found the service that we did, it offered a type of early intervention that allowed children to develop natural speech, clear natural speech like you or I. And I knew that that's what I wanted for my child. I didn't want him to learn to lip read and speak. I wanted him to learn auditory verbal therapy, which is, again, another scary term, but it just means listen and speak clearly. And that's what I wanted for my son. It turned out that my first play group session became an action group meeting because all of the other mothers there were on maternity leave and had extraordinary skills, which we realised were the perfect complement for us to naively pick up the service and I guess recreate it. So Hear the Children was born within a couple of weeks. We managed to learn to fundraise. We'd never fundraised before, but we managed to learn to fundraise. We managed to secure Fairfax as our exclusive media partner. I don't know how we did this, but anyway, and capture the imaginations of the community in a way that carried us, you know, on their shoulders for a good couple of years while we campaigned with government. But when we first started, so our service closed down at the end of 2009, term 4, 2009, and Hear the Children opened in term 1 of 2010 with every child from the service that had closed down coming on board, and with enough money in the bank to make us solvent that we'd fundraised, and with a fire to want to try and change this landscape so that children can have nowhere to go to learn to listen and speak. But when we first were speaking to government, I don't even think they were doing child-centred right. I remember having a conversation with a bureaucrat at what was then known as ARACY in New South Wales, who said to me, well, I'm sorry, Yvonne, what you want is you want the funding to follow the child, and that will never happen. And now we have the NDIS. But he also said, your child is funded, because we were reaching out to them to get a little bit of funding to support us. We were happy to keep fundraising. But he said to me these words, which just stunned me. Your child is actually funded. It's just we fund a completely different service that you don't go to, but that's not our problem. So as far as we're concerned, we've ticked a box and funded your child. So then it was about reframing that conversation to try and change, I guess, the way that ADIC approached their complex funding model. Give parents, you know, the choice to send their children to a service of their choice and a service that they felt was going to provide the right kind of support for their family. But Bec's right about burnout. And I think the gift about Hear the Children when we started it was we were a bunch of mums who had lived experience, and we built that service trying to make sure that it met the needs that we had when we came to the service. So even though we didn't understand the science of family-centered, that's inherently what we did. And I'm so proud that Hear the Children is still continuing on. It's now been auspiced by RADBC and is their exemplar service. And Charmaine, this extraordinary woman, is still running that service to this day, changing the lives of countless children. And my son, thankfully, because I had lots of warrior women around me fighting to make sure we survived, and it was really difficult. But thankfully, my son is like every other child who goes through that service now. He speaks better than I do. He's 11. He went into a mainstream school like every other child at age 6, and he just wears hearing aids like I wear glasses, and his hearing impairment will never be a handicap to him in his life. But he won the lotto, and it was quite accidental. There was no designer intent. It was a complete accident, and he's the reason I sit here today. So he's enriched my lives in ways beyond my wildest imagination. But what does concern me is those parents who don't win the lotto. What do we do for those families for whom their lives are much more complicated and complex? How do we remove the layers of complexity that government and systems place over the top of them that will break families? Yeah. And so for me, that's the driving force. And that's why this conversation with incredible women is so important, because we are part of a reimagining. And I think all of us in the work we do are part of the reimagining, and we've still got more work to do. And so it's a movement that must continue, because the outcome in supporting families from the very fabric of our communities to be able to get those extraordinary outcomes for their children and not have to fight for them and not have to struggle and not be overwhelmed by them and broken by them is everything. And that's what we need to keep continuing to do. And that's why this conversation is so important.
I might just, if I can, throw to Penny. And Penny, I'm wondering, I mean, you've probably got a lot of comments on what's coming up now. So happy for you to comment. But what I'm interested in hearing is, I mean, the work that you're doing at a national policy and research level is definitely focused on involving parents and lived experience in shaping that. Wondering how far we have to go and, where we've come from.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Look, I think it was really interesting. I thought Yvonne said it really well. She said even back then, they weren't even doing child-centered right. And I think that's important to remember is where we've come from. I think if you think about way back, and I'm talking, 20, 30 years about the way that the service system was designed, we didn't actually put children at the centre, let alone families of anything. It was really that very much, this is how a service operates. Might have even been a statement that this is how best practice service operates. And you will come and your child or the person who is the subject matter of this issue will be resolved through our processes. And then through a whole heap of research and some really good work and some advocacy from a lot of people, we did move to that Broffen-Bremer style ecological model that did place the child at the centre of our systems. But you're right, thinking has evolved since then. And I have to say, I would agree with Yvonne that I'm not quite sure that we ever got that child-centred approach correct anyway. But I think the point there is that, and I think Bec summed it up really nicely, is that these kids don't exist. Kids don't exist inside an isolated little bubble at the centre of the universe. They are actually surrounded by their family. And I really want us to take as broad a definition as family as we possibly can in that. They're surrounded in the places that they live, the places where they are loved and nurtured. And what we are moving to now is a much more family-centred approach and a much more an approach that's actually much more focused on the context in which the child lives and grows up, and the need for us to take that context into the design of the way that we deliver services, the design of the way we deliver, that we undertake research, and that we need to take the learning from that research into to build a cycle of continuous improvement within service delivery to make sure that those families and the children that they support sit in the centre. The other thing that I wanted to comment on is a little bit of language shift that we're trying to do, and I think Yvonne was talking about language being such a barrier. And I think one of the things that we've done with early intervention, and I agree it does sound painful, it sounds like some horrible thing that someone's going to stick you with, and it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't, we tried to think around early intervention as scaffolding or support, or something that helps you shore up. But none of that is particularly good either. So, I think there's a project for somebody who is really good at framing to actually come up with better descriptions for things like early intervention or scaffolding. But at ARACY, we've started really to move away from that safety net language. I don't like it. I don't like the idea of being caught by something with giant holes in it. If you put a picture of a net in your mind, it's it's lots of very thin little strappy bits that are joined together, but the holes are actually bigger than the bits that you catch, the strappy bits. Instead, we've started talking about supports as trampolines. If you think about a trampoline net in your mind, it's actually, the holes in a trampoline net are almost microscopic. You can't actually see them. They're also much more bouncy than a net. A net catches you, and a net keeps you in a place and holds you. A trampoline actually bounces, and it allows you to bounce back. And ideally, what we want to see are early intervention or scaffolding supports that are like trampoline nets. They not only catch you, they do stop you falling through the cracks. They stop families going through all of the problematic stuff that Bec was talking about earlier, but they're built and they're designed in such a way that they catch you and then they throw you back. And ideally, the better designed that trampoline net is, the higher you bounce. You don't have to bounce back to where you were. You can actually bounce back better. I know it's a sort of a resilience phrase, but it's true. You can, if your safety trampoline is able to catch you and throw you back up higher and throw your family back up higher, then it's doing a better job than a safety net. And what we would see in a system, and I think we have to be really careful about how we talk about systems, but I think in a really well designed early childhood system, we actually have our trampolines through universal platforms, through secondary services where those are necessary. We have them so closely put together that there are no holes where you can fall between trampolines. And when you hit a trampoline, when you, for some reason or another, you need to access the systems, the services that are around you. Those services are so well designed and so well built that you hit them, you utilize them, and you bounce back in such a way to strengthen families and strengthen children.
Absolutely. Yes, so much to all of that. I was going to throw to you, Bec. We've talked a lot around seamless integration and how nice it would be. And, the intention of the NDIS was really to have all of your life feel better and be supported, but you didn't really know how. And it hasn't really worked out like that at the moment for some families who have had a different experience, but that it was going to strengthen family and informal networks for you to live a better life. And we've spoken about sometimes the more complex and systems you cross over with, the bigger the black hole. Do you have any comments to make on what Penny was talking about?
I really love that analogy around the trampoline, because I've never really connected with the safety net terminology either, because like you said, Penny, a net has holes in it and a safety net never truly catches you. I think a trampoline is a great way of looking at it, and I think it's reframing it in the way it needs to be. Framed. It's about helping families to be able to bounce back and bounce higher, like Penny said. I just wanted to touch quickly too, if it's okay, on the language.
Heck, everything's okay. Please go forth.
Something that really
douse me in your poetry.
I feel like I'm not a very good poet today. I'll get there though. It really connected with me, and it's something that has, it's a common thread in what I do professionally as well, working with families, and it was for us as well in along our journey, and it was something that I had to learn to develop my skill set in substantially, with understanding language and the language that's thrown at you. And I think especially when you're coming into the NDIS world, there's a lot of big words, a lot of red tape, and a lot of language that most families just don't know what to make of. And if you haven't been in that language world for a very long time, it's very hard to know what to make of it and how to cut through all that red tape and those big words and that language. And, you know, even going back to our early days in our journey, some of those words that get thrown at you, early intervention, this and that. And, you know, and I was lucky in that I had a bit of a start from working in children's services. So I kind of understood some of that language, but it's really hard and it's really confronting and it's really scary. And you're suddenly having to access all these services and all these supports, and you don't know where to go, and you don't necessarily have that overarching family support. It's really difficult for families and it's really scary. And I think, like we've all been commenting on, is like you've both been commenting on, Yvonne and Penny, it's something we really need to work on as well, is reframing that language and working from a place where it's people friendly, it's family friendly, it's understandable, it's relatable. It's not going to be something that's said and you go, oh my God, what does that mean? Is that going to be something, like you said, Yvonne, painful? Is that painful? Is that something that's not going to sit right, that we're not going to, what is that? How do we make that happen? I don't want to do that. I want to run away. I want to run far away from the hills. Because when your child is diagnosed with a disability or a complex diagnosis, first thing you want to do is just run away and stay in your bubble. And it's very difficult to come to terms with the fact that you have to come out of that bubble. That bubble isn't going to be there. That bubble's burst and it's gone. And that realization is extraordinarily painful. And you create a new bubble. There's a new bubble that is your life's journey bubble, your child's stories bubble. But it is a bubble that, like we've talked about before, Anna, there's a lot of light. There's a lot of beauty. There's a lot of good. And your eyes open to things that you never would have seen before had you not been on this journey. However, that bubble is also sometimes made of steel, and it is trapping, and it is hard, and it is painful. But in the day-to-day life, when you're in that bubble and you're stuck in that bubble, you don't realize you're in the bubble all the time. And you don't see what you're doing every day. And you don't see the battles you're fighting every day necessarily. You don't see the big words you're having to pull apart and work out. You don't see the routines and the hours and hours of things you have to do for your child, and the hours and hours of things that your child needs to go through to survive, and to live a fulfilling, meaningful life, to give them everything they need. You don't see it all the time. You're in that bubble that switches from light to steel. But then every now and then something happens, like when you go to your NDIS meeting, or you start planning for your NDIS, or you have to meet, you get a new diagnosis, or something even so little and may seem insignificant suddenly forces you outside of that bubble. And you're sitting there looking back in going, how did this happen? What is this? What is this bubble? What is this journey? What is this life? How is this even where we're at? This isn't the story we had. This isn't the journey we were meant to have. This isn't how we saw this being. And then you think about all the battles you've had to face, all the big words you've had to battle through, all the journeys, all the people you've had to know. You know, if I put together a list of all the people I used to have to keep in touch, and the teams and everyone I had to update, it'd be well over 200 people just for Mark alone. You know, that's a job in itself. You know, you get pushed out of that bubble when you're talking to NDIS and you're sharing your story and you're having to relive it and you're having to try and justify. You have to justify why your child needs supports.
Yeah.
Why your family needs supports.
Bec, just on that, in terms of the work that you're doing now, I mean, like the advocacy work for families pre-NDIS meeting is an interesting concept in itself. And then the work you're doing around supporting families to map what their day-to-day looks like and helping guiding them through that. Did you want to make comment about that? I guess it leads to, when I was doing pre-planning work for families, I had this game called NDIS Bingo. And it was sort of trying to make a situation that's quite distressing funny, in that it was you need to know what parental responsibility means: reasonable and necessary, sustaining informal supports, all of these professional-led jargon terms that don't mean actually anything to families. And if we can switch that and make language make sense, which I think happens from a number of reasons, but one of them having families involved in service delivery and key parts of teams and all levels of organisations. Did you want to make comment on that, Bec?
Look,
or
I
Yvonne?
think...
Sorry?
You want to go, Yvonne, first?
No, you go, Bec.
Yeah, you go, Bec.
I was going to say, parental responsibility, sorry, let me start again. Parental responsibility in itself as a word, I think, can become very confronting to families and almost offensive at times, because the fact that they have to justify what they do is not parental responsibility, is confronting in itself. And trying to break through all those big words, like you said, maintaining informal supports, parental responsibility, and trying to put it in a way where it isn't this big scary beast. And we work with families to be able to look at, if we're, for instance, breaking down a day in the life of their child, we try and break it down in a way where we start with thinking about everything they do for their child, and we try and put it in a positive, like we think about the positive things, but we have to think about the hard things as well. And it's breaking it down in a way where it's understandable, it's relatable, and they can look at it and be able to share a window into everything they do and outline everything that they have to do in a day for their child. And that flows on to the week, to the month, to the year. And we've really started working closely with families around very much presenting, being able to work a way to present and create a format of being able to present that to the NDIS where it breaks it down and it's there in black and white in writing. So it takes the pressure off families of having to re-explain that and go through it detail by detail by detail, because it's exhausting every time you have to share your story, every time you have to go into every ounce of detail. It is exhausting, and you've got this fear, am I going to miss something? Am I going to forget to say something? What if I forget to share one of the most important things that I need to make sure is on the list and that isn't missed? And by working with families to break it down in an easy format where it's very straightforward, very black and white, to be able to present that in a way where they can go, this is what we do, this is our life, this is my child's life, but this is our family's life, this is what we have to do for our child to keep them going, to keep them alive, to give them everything they need. And that then flows on to being able to show the supports the family needs, because it's not everyday life for a person to have to give 23 hours support in a 24-hour day or 35 hours of support in a 24-hour day. It's not possible without supports in place. It's not possible for a family to maintain that. And it's really confronting, I think, for families, but also enlightening in a sense when they actually look back and see everything they do for their child. And they go, I've never even put that down on paper before. How do I do 30 hours of work in a 24-hour day? That's not even possible, but I have to do that. That's what we do for our child.
Interesting that I might throw to Penny here, because just in relation to, we're talking about NDIS planning now, but I know for you, Bec, as well, you've planned with the medical system, you planned with the education system, and that another family that was really influential in the blueprint, we mapped out their daily timetable and in different colours had the different systems who were providing support at different time. And the mum spoke about, or Sally spoke about how she had she put in a different game face for each different conversation because of the language that was needed to use, and how she had to frame the support she needed. So I thought I'd throw to Penny around sort of this whole approach to, and ARACY's doing this in terms of talking about early childhood development as a whole, but this navigating different cross systems, states, territories, Commonwealth, and then the departments within that. Do you have any comment on that, Penny?
Yeah, I think, I don't know how familiar the audience is with the work that ARACY's done. About nearly 8 years ago now, we started to do some work around developing the NEST, which is our ecological model of positive child development, really. It basically says that in order for every child in Australia to thrive, and we mean every child, that means kids with disabilities, it means Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids, it means migrant kids, it means kids with complex diagnosis. Every child, genuinely every child, they need to have 6 basic elements of their experience of life met, and that the child needs to feel valued, loved and safe. They need to have their material basic needs met. They need to be healthy, whatever that looks like. And that doesn't mean every child needs to have, you know, a really profound state of physical health, but they need to be the healthiest that they can be. They need to be learning. And by that, we don't mean just being in school. They need to be able to learn in a positive way. They need to be able to participate. And then by that, we mean be able to participate in their families, in their communities, and really importantly, participate in decision making that is relevant to decisions that are about them, as well as wider decision making. And they need to be able to develop their own positive sense of their identity and their culture. So we think about that. That's the model that we think about. Every child needs those things in place to thrive. And we know from a whole heap of research that we've done through analysis of some data from some of the big national longitudinal surveys, that if a child is, the word that we use is deprived, and it's actually a really scientific term. There's actually, you know, deprivation, you can do some really complex calculations and define where deprivation starts. But if a child is deprived in one of those areas, they're really likely to be deprived in more of those areas. And the more areas they're deprived in, the more that snowballs. And so when we think about navigating the system, and like I said before, I think the system is a really problematic term in of itself, because a system, when a system is properly developed, we talk about systems because they have things like feedback loops, and they have pathways that link you from one part of a system to another. And so when we talk about our Australian early childhood development system, we're actually giving it a status that it doesn't have, because we don't actually have those feedback loops. We don't have those pathways. What we actually have is a series of interconnected broken systems. And so, you know, some of those areas, the systems are stronger than the others. So we have, I think, quite an established health system. We have quite an established early childhood education and care system. We have a fairly well-established family services system. And I say fairly well-established for all of those. I don't think any of them have got all of those beautifully constructed feedback loops and referral pathways and things like that. But we've found something is really interesting is that sometimes and often the most important parts of those systems sit, if you think about that framework, those 6 domains of well-being in a circle, the really important parts are at the very center of that circle, and we call them the nexus points between those domains. So it's where loved and safe juts up a bit against education. It's where healthy or disability or mental health juts up against education, or just juts up against child protection, or any of the other elements that sit within that circle. And it's where those systems really need to be strong and well connected that we see that they're not. And so what we've been trying to advocate for a long time at ARACY is a much stronger focus on making sure the subsystems that sit within this broader childhood development system in Australia have actually got the right connections in place, so that a family, all they really need to know are is how to interpret that thriving framework for their own family and for their own child, so that they can know going in, in order for my child to thrive, I need all of these things to be in place, and this is where I go for that, and then the connections themselves flow from that. Like I think somebody talked about lots of wrong doors earlier, and what we talk a lot about is no wrong doors. So wherever you enter the service system in that well-being framework, wherever you enter should be able to connect you and your family up with all of the other things your child and your family need to thrive. We don't have that in Australia. We're working really hard. We're advocating really strongly for it. There's a lot of big thinkers thinking about how we might be able to make that better. We're trying, ARACY has put out a statement last year, basically a children's voice statement that basically says we're refusing now to do any work for government agencies or philanthropists who don't allow us to incorporate child or family voice into the work that we're doing. I can't tell you how hard it was to actually come up with, not that the statement's hard, I mean, we know that those voices are really vital, but it's something we battle against all the time, is allowing agencies to fund us to do work that includes an element of that voice into the work that we do. But we've come up with that statement. We're not going to do work that's about people without doing the incorporating voice, and that's already cost us some jobs, people who are not prepared to actually fund that type of work. And I think that's a really profound piece of advocacy that you guys are the owners of. You need to come up and say, we don't want to be you know, we don't want to see work that's completed without our voices. We don't want you to fund, government or philanthropy or whoever, to fund work that doesn't actually incorporate our voices. And in doing that, we've got to make sure that those the work that is being done as we try and construct this better system is grounded in the voices of lived experience. And we can advocate that for that, and you guys can advocate for that. And only when we're one sort of united voice saying that it can't be done without that, will, I think, some of those systems development stuff be more grounded in lived experience.
Yeah, I'm going to throw to Yvonne here because I can see her
Amen.
nodding her head. Her head might actually blow off.
Yeah, I'm in the church of my soul here. I just wanted to be just going yes to everything that Penny was just saying.
Because I think also we got such pushback. We can be really honest about it as well, for the early intervention blueprint by a few people that work in the space that were confused about why we were focusing so heavily on family experience and going across the country and using that as the starting place, and that we didn't waver on that despite the pressure from some people in the sector. So yeah, Yvonne, did you want to make comment about that and why it was so important to you as well?
Yeah, but also to put the blueprint in context. So for those people who don't know, one of the first things that I was able to do when I came on board as a CEO was to secure a tiny bit of funding from the Commonwealth Government to create a pathway, a roadmap for early childhood intervention, because there just wasn't one. We didn't have a North Star to navigate to. And so Anna has been on this journey. She's been leading this journey on the blueprint for the past year, and COVID has interrupted, I guess, the flow of us delivering the blueprint to market. But there's disastertunity. Everybody who knows me knows I've made up this word disastertunity because the Chinese have the same word for opportunity and disaster. So there is some disastertunity in the blueprint being held off for a little bit. But the good news is that we should have some draft recommendations to be able to release in the next couple of weeks to a month, which is really exciting for us. But everything Penny has just been saying is the heart of the blueprint. She knows it, we know it. We've now got a huge evidence base for to meet Bec, not in person, it's kind of in person through Zoom today, but the work that Bec and other extraordinary families entered into with us to build the foundations of the blueprint. And the blueprint does speak to those issues about systems, again, another horrible word in Anna's NDIS word bingo. We can add that one in there. But I just wanted to go back to language, if I may, because it is so important and it's fundamental. And so I'm not a subject matter I'm a subject matter expert as a person with a lived experience. I'm not an OT, I'm not a physio, I'm not a key worker, I'm not an early educator. I just know what I've lived, and I know all the wrong doors that I've found and all of the people who reach out to me find. And we can embark on a journey with the sector, another terrible word, barrier of a word. We can embark on a journey with the sector and with government, and we can transform systems and frameworks. But unless we get the language right, we've still got a gated city, to use one of Bec's terms. We've still got a huge barrier for parents. So we really need to democratize the language. And for me, when we were first having these conversations, and every subsequent conversation, every wrong door that we went to, I mean, we would turn up to meetings, to paediatric appointments that we'd waited 3 months for and that we'd paid $400 for, and we'd turn up and the paediatrician would say, I don't know why you're here, why are you here? We had no idea what we do. There was nobody helping us, but at the heart of the language was missing people. There was no hope, there was no support, there was no empathy, and there was no respect. And so what I've tried to do ever since then, through Hear the Children, and through my work in local government, and now through my work at ECIA, which is the greatest privilege of my life, is try to introduce those feelings into the way that we communicate. We still have a long way to go, but this is something that we all need to work on together. And I love the analogy that Penny came up with the trampoline. If we can just adopt that universally, Penny, I would love it, because it's so powerful. And it helps build a picture in parents' minds, because when we first go and start having these conversations, they're all about, I guess, the box that our child is now in, or the box that our family is now in, and things our family can't do, rather than the things that we actually can do and can achieve. And for me, that was it happened. I was very lucky. I won the lotto. I found this extraordinary person called Charmaine, who changed my world. And respect and kindness, and helped me reframe my thinking about what I can achieve, what my family can achieve, and what my son can achieve. And so in order to make this wholesale change that we really need to do, because at the moment, disappointingly, the evidence shows us that early childhood intervention is a tertiary priority across government and systems. We need to raise up early childhood intervention into a national early childhood development framework. So Penny, we are speaking the same language. I love this. But in order to do that, we have to start with people, and we have to start with the language. So I just keep wanting to say, every time you're talking, Penny, can I get an amen? Because the conversation, and this is the first part of what we're doing, Reimagining, which is a conversation that we need to have with the community, so that we can start saying, this is where we are. Nobody's crazy or mad. We're all experiencing the same thing, but together we can lead the sector on a journey where we can change these things from the grassroots up. And so the hope is that one day ECIA will be completely out of business, because there's no need for us to advocate for better outcomes for children and their families, because it's already embedded at the fabric of our community. So, I hope that we put ourselves out of business quickly. I suspect not. I suspect that we are still on this journey together. And I'm so grateful for the wisdom that we have in the room, and also for the commitment from the extraordinary sector. I keep using the word, see, I've got problems. But from the extraordinary sector that we work in. We've got a lot of work to do, but together, as Penny said, there is lots of hope. I'm filled with hope about the changes that we can make for the families that are yet to be formed and children who are yet to be born.
Yvonne, I'll just share a funny story, because I think you'll appreciate it. About 2 years ago, I was in a board meeting with the then chair of my board, and I used the term "the sector" somewhere, and she just went, "Stop. I can't bear that word. Who exactly are you talking about?" And I listed off this enormous list of people, and she was like, "Well, refer to them like that." And I just thought, okay.
So let's just say everyone instead of the sector, because it pretty much is everyone, right? Yeah.
I think one of the words I tend to prefer to use is team. I really like the word team, and we tend to use the word team a lot in our language that we use, because it's about working as a team. It's about being all on the same page and working together. And I use that a lot in my daily practices, because I feel like it's an inclusive word. We're all working together. We're all on the same path. We're all on the same journey, walking it together. And I think, if it's okay, I'd just like to say a couple of things from complete the same with what you said, Penny. Amen. Completely on board. Oh my God, yes, that is just words like perfect. That's everything in this needs to be. I think winning the lotto, which is something you said that really struck with me, because I feel like there are families who win the lotto and they get those therapists. We were one of those. We had an amazing therapy team set up. We had an amazing medical team set up. We actually won the lotto in that sense. And you don't realise, I never actually truly realised how far ahead of the game that put us. And there are families who they don't win the lotto. They don't know where to go. They don't have the supports. They don't have anywhere to start. They don't even know where to start. And it really put things into perspective for me personally when I went, we actually really won the lotto in that sense. Like, we were really lucky. I was ahead of the game. And I think that's something we really need to work on too, is making sure that everyone has the ability to start from the same place. Everyone has access to those supports. Everyone knows where to go. Like you said, everyone knows how to get help, where to go, how to have supports. And they've got that innate sense of having that trampoline there, which I think is the most amazing analogy as well. And I think something that's often, and we've spoken about this before, Anna, many times, is something that's often forgotten a lot of the time, whether it be in medical, like in health, in education, or very commonly, unfortunately, happens a lot within NGIS world, is it's forgotten the parents are the expert. They are the expert of their child. They know their child better than anyone else on this planet. They know everything about their child, and they are the experts. And I think that needs to be held in from a strong point. I think that needs to be something that we reflect on and we remember, and that teams, I'm going to call them teams, not sectors, because I dislike that word too, sector. It's such a disjointed word, and it's like them and us. I think that needs to be remembered. And something I remember being said to us, which struck a chord, and it was from one of our lead neurologists. And I think I've mentioned this to you before too, Anna. One of the things that was said to us when things got very difficult with Mark, and I would be seeing red flags everywhere. And this is from a health point, like I was seeing things go wrong. I was seeing things like this everywhere. And one of the things he said to me, I'll sort of summarize it, is as a parent, you know your child, you know Mark better than anyone else. You're seeing all these things. You know what's going on with your child. But you are his expert. You know him, Bec. Don't try and tell us everything you're seeing in flags. Just be like, don't try and put a word to everything you're seeing, all these things going wrong. Tell us something's wrong. Tell us something's not right. Tell us you need help. Tell us that he's not right. Tell us you've got that knot in your stomach. We will do the looking, because language isn't linear either. And I think that's something we get caught in as parents too, is we've got so much going on, so much to transfer, so much to give, so much we're seeing, so many things happening for our child in one situation, in one field of one thing, whether it be, from a speech point, from an early intervention therapy point, from a medical point, from just a daily life point. There's so much always going on. Trying to pass something on in language is linear. It's hard to say what we're seeing. And I always joke about the fact that my brain, especially with everything with Mark, is like a computer screen, like a Google with a million tabs up on the top, like 50, 60, 70 tabs open at any one time. And it's really hard to put that all into linear language, like to transfer that over to someone, especially when you know it's urgent, it's important. It needs to get across. It's really hard to get that across. And I'll never forget him saying, just tell us and we'll do the looking. We'll work with you. We'll find it out. And I know that's more from a medical point, but that's something that really struck with me, because that was reaffirming the fact I am my child's expert. I know my child, and he heard me. He heard us.
I think it touches on a really important point, Bec, is the beauty of a partnership, because often in society we can have this, duality or polarity sort of come up, that if you're the expert of your child, then what am I in that you can actually, you're the expert of your own child and the neurologist knows neurology. And it's the marrying of the two in terms of partnerships where the magic happens. And it's not to say there's only room for one expert of whatever it is in the room, but it's to say, how do we actually work together so that you have the person whose experience it is and whose body it is there as a voice, which is the child, the person whose family it is, who's wrapped around supporting the child, in partnership with the person who might know a bit about the thing that you're needing support with, and how this bit plays out in between.
It's Penny, and I think that's something that we can really learn from Indigenous knowledge systems, where we really privilege different perspectives, and it is that piece that, you know, there are different types of expertise, and the best work is done when those groups work in partnership. And you know, from my experience, was one of the really things that I love about that NEST framework that we've developed around wellbeing and thriving, because we at ARACY, I was before my time, but they did both. They actually developed that framework through consultations with 4,000 people around the country who either were the parents and carers or were themselves children. But then they also went back to the books, and they sat down and they did really hardcore literature research to find out what the experts in wellbeing said it took, and then brought those two things together, and the lived experience research and the what I call book research actually matched up, and they said, using very different language, but they essentially said the same things. And you know, one of the things that we've felt really vindicated on with that work recently to our New Zealand friends online is that if you actually look at the New Zealand new wellbeing framework that was released last year, and you match it back to the NEST framework that's been there since 2013, again, the language is different. And I have to say our Kiwis have probably got some much nicer language than we have. But fundamentally, if you look at the indicator level that sits behind those two statements, they actually match up and marry really, really nicely. And so when you take the time to use different knowledge systems, when you combine Indigenous knowledge with lived experience, with book science, with hardcore you know, lab science, you can actually get a better value for what you're trying to do, and by acknowledging that each of those things brings its own value to the situation.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, the depth of our lives and our experiences is shaped by the multiple perspectives that we can have and that we can learn from as well. And I know for myself, in a lifetime of chronic health, for most of it when I was a child and didn't really have the voice as much, or people didn't, specialists weren't listening to my own experience, going sort of from operation to operation, and different specialists owning different issues of my body. I was sort of just in this one perspective that that's what the experts knew, and that they sort of knew everything about my body. And it wasn't until I sort of moved through a process of myself around, hang on a second, what do I feel? That sort of start to shift my perspective. Yvonne, do you have any comments to make around this? What I'm interested in as well is sort of in the how we're doing this, because even just being here today, we have Bec and Yvonne both in the field, working in the space with your own experience. And last week we heard from our beautiful friends at Plumtree with the Now and Next program. And Penny, I know you have a parent engagement group, as well as all of your work and your strong statement that you won't do work without family, parent, child voice. How do we start to make sure that there is sort of, this is representation at all levels, and acknowledging that we wear multiple hats, and that you can be this and this and this? Yeah.
Sorry, is my internet okay right now? It's telling me it's a bit unstable.
It's good.
You know, I think I'm a really action-oriented person. I like to do. I don't like to endlessly talk. And I think at the moment, the thing that's really keeping me up at night is the inability to do the things that really we all know, we've got the evidence base there, we all know that need to be done. And the one thing that's really a recurring nightmare for me is this every wrong door term that I've been using a lot to explain the parent journey. I had a conversation with the NDIA, and I'm not picking on the NDIA, they do extraordinary work, but I had a conversation with someone at the NDIA who said to me that their data was telling them that parents were finding it a joy to deal with the NDIA. And I remember being quite staggered, because I'm getting accidentally, we're not the right people for 10 to 12 parents contacting me a day because they're lost, because they've found every wrong door. And for those parents, I try to be the right door and guide them in the right direction. But I've never had a parent come up to me and say, I found the NDIA really easily and it was a joy. I'm hearing quite the opposite. And so for me, the concern right now is the parents start seeing the red flags, or if you're lucky, But from the moment of the red flags, that journey for parents and families is so overwhelming and so complicated and so overloaded with every wrong door and so overloaded with constantly Googling what the heck does that word mean. I still do it 3 or 4 times a day, I have to tell you, and I'm the CEO of Early Childhood Intervention Australia. I'm still Googling words that I don't understand. But that they're unnecessarily complicated and overwhelming for parents. And for me, this is the piece that we need to really focus on right now, because we hear that you get the right supports to a child and their family, the better the possibilities that you can achieve for that family. For me, it's about best practice early intervention in your life is a lost opportunity for that child, and it really weighs on my heart. So it's this process from the very first red flag that we need to capture families and was talking about, that we need to bring it to families. We need to meet families where they are. Us out and find wrong doors. I want to be there. I want to be the right door. I want to have the right door for every family to go to, so that they can get access to a system that will support the whole family, not just the child's disability. And I know that Bec has some perfect words around the need for them not to just see my child through the lens of their disability, but to see my whole child and my whole family that will support the development of that child. And if it's right from the early flag stage, can you imagine the families of tomorrow? Can you imagine the communities of tomorrow? And, you know, if I was sitting in, can you imagine the economic benefit of this? Let's get this started. Let's get it going. So for me at the moment, I'm finding it a little bit frustrating because I'm such a doer. I want to get out there and do this stuff that we have the evidence base for, that needs to be funded, I guess, in an appropriate way, so that we can get the information in a language that parents need and the direction and the support. And I don't want to push parents in a direction. I want to walk alongside them, because whilst I'm the expert about my child, I'm not the expert about the system. I'm not the expert. I need help to navigate that. Navigate, again, is a term for, but that's what I need help with. And that's what I need help with now. We've got the evidence there. So for me, right now is in the doing.
Sorry, Yvonne, I'm losing you a little bit with your internet connection.
Yeah, the more that we can get. Oh, we've lost the connection?
Just a little bit, but I'm just going to quickly throw to Penny, because unfortunately Penny has to leave us, and then us three can continue the conversation. So Penny.
No, I just wanted to thank so much for the opportunity to be here and be part of the conversation today, Anna. It's really so good to see, I guess. I mean, we talk a lot at ARACY about systems change, and we are very much an organisation that's around making sure that kids don't win the lotto. We don't, like, winning the lotto is like my father-in-law was a mathematician, and he used to tell us that, you know, your chances of winning the lotto were only marginally increased by buying a ticket. And, you know, I think that that's not a system for positive early child development in Australia.
It's not good enough. Absolutely not.
You know, the work that we're doing at ARACY is about trying to make sure that the experience that each child needs to get their optimal outcome, the best outcome for them, is a system that actually understands their needs, understands the needs of their families, and is grounded, as we've said, in the lived experience of children and families. It's a really big piece of advocacy. Like, I think COVID-19 has presented such a powerful opportunity for us. It's really funny. We've been joking, and you know, that it's the best socialist government we ever elected at the moment, with all of these, you know, really strong social platforms around free childcare, job seeker, you know, increase to job seeker payments, and I think we have a really powerful opportunity around advocacy at the moment to actually encourage people who are in positions of decision making to listen to the things we've got to say about why it's really important for kids to get the best start to life, and all kids, not just, you know, very average kids, but kids from all sorts of circumstances. And so I would encourage everybody on the call to think about the potential for advocacy right now, because I think people are listening. People want to build back better, and I hate that term, but I'm going to use it. And there are things from the past that we don't need to take forward, and they're things that we've learnt out of this disaster opportunity, to use Yvonne's phrase, that we do want to take forward into the future. So yeah, be really clear about how we, you know, the power of our opportunity to advocate at the moment. If ARACY can do anything and be of any use to anybody, please be in touch. I mean, our website is out there, and you know, I have a team doing some really amazing work on a variety of things that are relevant to this at the moment. But thank you for the opportunity to be here. And yeah, I really like working with ECIA. You guys are awesome.
Thanks, Penny. And as you said before, it's actually every child's birthright to have the things they deserve. It's not a lottery, it's our birthright. And so it's a pleasure being on this journey with you, Penny. Thank you so much for your generous
everyone.
time
Bye.
today.
Thank you, Penny.
Bye.
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 And Bec, you're right, the term team really resonates with me, and I use it a lot. I use it a lot in the ECIA comms. I often sign them from hashtag, because I'm a hashtag queen of the universe as well, but I often sign them from hashtag team ECIA, because it's not just me. There's actually a team of people. There's a, you know, a team of minds, all you know, that are part of ECIA. And I think you're right. The word team is really powerful. And I always find that the most magic happens in my life when I'm surrounded by people who are different to me, who challenge my thinking, and we're all working together because we have that shared purpose.
Yeah.
When you're doing that, that's when the magic happens. So team is so important.
I think it's having.
Sorry. No, you go, Bec. I was just going to throw some questions at you that have come through from the crowd.
I was just going to say, it's that team of having that central purpose, that central goal, and when you said walking alongside the families too, that's something that resonates really strongly with me as well, because that's how I am. And that's something like, even at ARC, we walk their journey alongside them. And it's about being a part of their team and working with the team, and all of us bringing something to the table, and all of us having something that can contribute and help the journey, and all of us working together. We're not all experts on everything, but we all have something that we can contribute, from lived experience, from working in an industry, from having a specialty. We can all contribute something and work together in a partnership for the best possible results, and to make a difference, and make a real tangible difference that's actually going to have lasting impacts. And I think there's so many processes to go through as a family in this industry, in this world, and I hate using the word industry, but it, you know, in this sector, don't like that word either. Like, literally doesn't want to come out of my mouth when I say that. But there's so many processes to work through and to cut through and to understand, and it's so overwhelming and confusing, and you don't want to make a mistake. You don't want to do the wrong thing and then have it inadvertently penalise your child because they miss out on something, or your family misses out on support. And then you know that if your family's not supported, how do you maintain caring for your child? How do you support your child? How do you keep going? And I think there's so much scope to be able to make a difference, and to continue to empower families and strengthen families, and create that trampoline base for them to have around them, supporting them, knowing that I really, honestly, that stuck with me through and through as well. Having that trampoline and being able to know that that's there, and that you've got your partnership with your teams, and we can add to the teams, and we can support that team and build it up. It's just so powerful.
There's a couple of questions actually that have come through in relation to parents on the call on our Zoom with lived experience also, and one directed a question to you, Yvonne, around does the blueprint address the very initial stages, or the first days even, of how to navigate the maze? So the comment is related to having a child with hearing loss as well, and feeling like it was painful and having to push for cochlear implants, and that the gaps in the system in the initial process left them feeling quite isolated. So in terms of the blueprint component, you know, those first few moments are very much we realize that we don't have, and as Penny said before, I mean, I can openly say that we cannot say that we have a responsive needs-based early intervention system in Australia. We work really hard trying to, but it's definitely not responsive. We had parents was a common process for people to be waiting years to even access support, needing to have a tick box of a diagnosis before they could even have a conversation about getting support, and just barrier after barrier after barrier, and this not being believed, and this wait and see culture of, we'll just wait and see what will happen. We'll wait and see what will happen. Yvonne, so this comment's around you, around specific to hearing, but did you want to make a comment about those early days and what you had or didn't have?
So we had no information. We had no help, no guidance. I think they might have given me a pamphlet that didn't tell me anything. It was, I think, just a front and back DL card, and it was really useless. But you'll be happy to know that the blueprint has definitely identified the fact, all of the things that Anna just said. So the fact that we really don't have a responsive early intervention system. It doesn't talk in a language to parents that's accessible. It doesn't decode. So we have these wonderful things at ECIA called the National Guidelines, which you can't understand if you read them. They need to be decoded. So, and this is pretty typical of the whole system. It doesn't talk to us in a language that we understand, and it leads to isolation. And I have never felt so alone as I did in my early journey to get Asher into the right services, or even to understand his impairment, to even understand what it was, because I'd never been touched by this world before. And so the blueprint does make a series of recommendations. And as I said, we're really excited that we're just finalising the draft of that now, and with DSS, we'll be releasing those out to market, so you can have a look and comment on the draft recommendations over the course of the next month. But definitely this is a key part of the blueprint recommendations, that we need to address this in meaningful ways, and in ways that remove that sense of isolation and remove that sense of overwhelm for parents. So at the heart of all of the blueprint recommendations are families and the welfare and well-being of families. So while I can't give you any specific information just yet, I'm hoping that you'll feel encouraged that your voice has been heard and is echoed back in the blueprint, and that we hope to land and deliver it in a way that it is a living, breathing document. It is a document that is actioned. It is not a document that is put in someone's drawer and the drawer is closed.
Bec, any comments on your end around those first few days, or the feeling you felt about, I mean, you talk so openly about the fights, you've feeling like it's been a fight sometimes, but also acknowledging that you've had some great support as well, of course. So
yeah, I think we've, on one hand, I hesitate to say easier experience from some sense, because it's not been an easy experience. It's been extremely difficult, challenging, but amazing at the same time, because we had our beautiful boy. Look, it's just that sense of overwhelmingness is just all encompassing. And I think it hits so hard in those early days, and there's so many feelings and emotions, and you start the grieving process, really, because you grieve your child's future. You grieve your family's future. You grieve what could have been, what may have been, what may not be. And you don't even know that that's necessarily happening at that time. And then in amongst all of that, you're suddenly trying to take action. You're trying to go, well, how do we fix this? What do we do? Where do we go? And you don't know where to turn necessarily. You don't know who to ask. You don't know what the response will be either. So, and you don't know what words to use necessarily. You don't know even, how do I start that conversation? How do I start asking for help? Where do I go? What do I do? And it just swirls around and around and around. And then that in itself is so overwhelming. And then there's that whole aspect of, what door do I knock on? What if that door gets slammed in my face? What if I get laughed at? What if I get told, oh, let's wait and see? You know, all these things that happen in that first few days, first few months, first even year. But those first few days, so much happens, and it's almost like the world just quietens around you for a second, and it's like a bomb's gone off and it's just silent, and you're just there going, what's just happened? What do we do? How has this happened? And you've flooded with questions. Do I Google? Don't I Google? What if I Google and I read something I don't want to read? What if I don't Google and I miss something that could help? And it's those questions that go over and over, and then you're trying to work out who do I speak to and where do I go? And then families these days, which is something we've spoken about too, is you're going through that, and then suddenly, let's get you on the NDIS. Got to face the NDIS. And unfortunately, you only ever hear those negative stories. You don't hear the good stories, the positives, the life-changing moments that do happen through the NDIS when it works well. So not only are you trying to work out who can you speak to, where do you get help, what do you do, can I fix my child, can't I fix my child, what does this mean for the future, who do I go to, what do I ask, oh my God, can we do this, what if we can't do this, what if we can do this, but how do I do this, how do we keep going? And the questions go, and then it's like, oh my God, we need to do early intervention. What is early intervention? And we've been talking about this throughout this conversation. But we've got to do NDIS, but what does that mean? And how do we do NDIS, but don't we do it in the hospital? But no, we've got to go outside of the hospital. And
so how do you navigate that with because I mean, what you do now is both, I know you do a lot of volunteer hours because it's just your life's passion, but also in your work with ARC as well. How do you sort of navigate that with, one of the questions was, how do we support parents and carers with no supports, no knowledge of where to go and who to trust? And from both of your experience, it sounds like, you know, in that landing moment when you're in that, you are those parent, both of you, where you didn't know where to go and where to seek the information. How do you navigate that now, Bec, with other parents?
I think one of the biggest things is to just try and take a breath. To take a breath and go, right, okay, what do we need to do? What is my priority? What do I need to ask? And start asking questions, because one of the biggest things, one of the most empowering things I found was asking questions. And then if I didn't feel it sat right, I asked again and I asked again and I asked again. But that's in my nature as well. I'm one of those people, I like to ask questions, and I will keep asking those questions until it sits with me, until I feel like, okay, that I can work with that, or I understand that. But it can be really confronting to do. But I think for us, when I work with families who are new to a diagnosis, when they're new to the NDIS, it's about starting from the ground up, starting from that grassroots point. What does your child need? Who is your child? What does your child need? But most importantly, what do you need to make sure your child's okay? How can I help you to help your child?
Yeah, I remember. Sorry, just what came to me then is a beautiful thing you said when you came over, when we were sitting by the beach that day in Perth, and you were talking about your process with Mark through the NDIS and the way that they were, the About Me page, and how the NDIS sort of wanted to, in your experience, take away the disability, or not speak openly about the fact Mark had a disability, when actually that was, he had all these other things that you wanted to talk about in the About Me, but that was also something that was him, and to not name it or pretend it was something else was an offensive thing to do to you and the family. And so I think that's really interesting as well. When this conversation's been really shaped around language, is even that as an identifying, and asking someone, how do you like to be identified with, and tell me about you as a whole.
I think that's really important. I think for me, I personally took it offensively when, like you said, when they were like, well, we only talk about the positives, we're positive based, we're strengths based. I'm like, but my child's being able to survive every day and get through what he goes through, that is a strength. My child is not his disability, but the fact that he gets up every day, he wakes up every morning, he fights with all that he can to get through the day, and he smiles and he shows us the light in the day that we would not have seen before had we not had him. That is a strength. That is to me the definition of a strength.
Yeah.
And I feel very strongly that if families want to share that entire story, want to say, this is my child, this is his disability, but it's not him. This is who he is. This is what he goes through. This is what he goes through. But it's not just him. He is he. Yeah. Mark is Mark. His strengths are his strengths. Yes, he has challenges. Yes, he fights every day to survive his diagnosis, his disability, but that is a strength. And I think that we've gone too far that way around. We're only doing, I joke and say, rainbows, unicorns, daisies, and that sort of stuff in the About Me, because that's what it sometimes feels like. And look, some families, that's what they want in there, and power to them. If that's what they want, that is what they want, and that's perfect. But I think it should be what a parent, what a family feels, describes their child, and shares their journey, and it's a window into that child's life. It's my daily life. It's my About Me.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What is that in its trueness, in its rawness?
Yeah.
How do we sum that up? How do we show that?
Yeah. I'm just conscious of the time, even though I just want to sit here all day.
I'll just keep talking, sorry.
No. So we're going to have to start wrapping up. So I just wanted to throw to both of you, and I guess a lasting or something for people to take away, which is really important to you around your reflection from this conversation and your life experience. Is there something that comes to mind that you'd like to share?
For me, I have been really fortunate on this journey, and I guess we're living the dream. And for me, my heart gets weighed down by the acknowledgement that that is very rare. And just touching on about my son, said to me when he went into kindy when he was 6, he came home, they'd been doing a piece on what do you want to do up, and he came to me and he said, "Mum, are superheroes real?" And I said, "Why do you ask?" And he said, "Because I'm thinking that I might want to be a superhero when I grow up." And I said to him, "Asher, you already are a superhero. You just don't realize it because you have worked so hard. You have overcome the challenges that were set before you, and you are now speaking better than I do," which sometimes is a bit annoying when he wins debates. But for me, I've lived the dream, and my dream is that becomes the norm. And in order for us to do that, we have a lot of work ahead of us, but I don't want us to be overwhelmed the same way that parents are overwhelmed by the amount of work that we need to do, because if we pull together and we chunk it down and we have the right ears listening and we're putting the right language around the activities and the actions that we need to take to get there, we can actually do it together. Yeah. And so having this conversation with the extraordinary women and Penny who has now left us, and with the community of people that are watching and the community of people that they interact with, is the most important thing that I could possibly be involved with. So for me, what I want to leave you all with is a sense of gratitude that I'm able to be part of this extraordinary movement, part of this team who will work as hard as we possibly can to make sure that my lived experience becomes typical of everybody's lived experience.
Thanks,
Yvonne. And Bec, got 1 minute left of our magic together.
I was going to say that's beautiful, Yvonne, and that is my sentiments exactly. It's I'm completely in gratitude and privileged to have been a part of this conversation, to be a part of this journey, to be able to share my boy's journey, to make a difference, to be able to be a part of making a real difference. And I am privileged to do that in my everyday job and in life. And I think if there's one thing I can leave, one little gem of knowledge or little bit of wisdom, is never doubt yourself. As a parent, as a mum, as a dad, as an uncle, as an aunt, as a carer, as anyone, never doubt yourself. Always trust in yourself and in what you know about your child. You are your child's expert, and hopefully in time we will build these teams around everyone, and you will be supported to continue being the expert and be supported to care for your child and feel like you have that team around you, and that you will be able to experience that feeling that Yvonne and I have been able to experience. And I hope that you can know and trust that one day that is going to happen, but never doubt yourself. Always trust in yourself and never stop asking questions. Always ask questions because they're so important.
Thanks, Bec. And thank you to you both, and also Penny. And I just wanted to acknowledge Bec, and I hope this is okay, but you know how we feel him around, which is Mark, and the spirit of your son, who I most definitely know has brought us all together. So I wanted to acknowledge him as well.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone that joined us today, and just loving the love that's coming through for everybody and the questions. Sorry we didn't get to answer them. Has someone said, how can we get these conversations onto an ABC program? We totally agree. We need to be having more critical conversations. But on that, next week, we are hosting an amazing conversation with Dr. Ben Gauntlet, the Australian Human Rights Commissioner for Disability, and Dr. Nancy Doyle from the UK, who is the brains behind Employable Me, which is a documentary.
And they have big shoes to fill following us, Bec.
They do.
They do.
And so we're going to keep on having these conversations, and we understand that they're a bit different than practice-based conversations, but really we can't have family-centred practice if we don't have family-centred systems, to say the word that we've all sort of shunned today, but in want for a better word. So thank you all. Thank you again to you both. And Yvonne, it's such a gift. I'm so sad that Tara obviously couldn't join us and bring an international perspective, but that meant that you jumped onto the stage, and it's been so nice to hear your experience. So thank you, and thank you to everybody. And Bec and Yvonne, make sure you're looking at the chat because you're getting lots of love in there. We'll see you all soon, everybody.
See you next time.
See you next time.